Hey everyone, my name is Harley and welcome to the Royalty. We're back with part 2. I'm so sorry that this had to be split into 2 sections, but I'm very grateful that you guys put up with me. So, let's continue where we left off with looting Tyranid spores. Hope you all are excited. I am excited. Hey Sven, Sigby. Hey Fallen Gamer, I'm feeling a lot better now. I needed some painkillers, I needed to sleep, the pain was getting heavy. So I don't know whether you noticed, I just like couldn't focus on anything. But I'm back. Kill the music. Boom. I'm feeling a lot better now. I feel alive now. So I can laugh and like chat and not be distracted. Sit. Alright, I hope y'all are ready.
Next we will learn more about Tyranid spores. And there is a surprising amount to study when it comes to Tyranid spores. It may not sound that interesting, but they are actually very important, although it can be fairly summed up by just stating they're numerous and they generally explode with horrible consequences. But Tyranids will deploy a variety of different spores upon planets, and this is usually one of the first signs of an oncoming Tyranid invasion. The most commonly known is what's referred to as a mycetic spore. These can appear as if they were a meteor.
That's my favorite meal. You are a fucker. That is my favorite meal. Oh my god.
Meteor shower penetrating a planet's atmosphere, crashing into, say, an ocean, seemingly causing little, if any, negative effect. The danger appears to pass. But then later, you begin to see vanguard forms like the Lictor or Genestealers appear, and this is when a world will begin to realise the meteor-like spore shower was just an initial seeding for what will now be a coming assault upon a world. So,
yo, good combo. I have this. Drink, smoke, pizza, the Game Awards. Yes, that sounds great. Liam, hi! Thank you all for coming back. I do want to properly apologise for earlier. It's not something I'm comfortable about. It's not something I usually mention. But, you know. It's a weakness I don't like to show. So, sorry.
So these mycetic spores are in essence like a living drop pod, yet they're also able to detect nearby threats and will lash out at anything nearby. They appear something like a hermit crab, and they may choose to make it to land or remain in a planet's ocean where they will soon die after impact, but their role is fulfilled as their cargo will burst forth from within them, unleashing a brood of Tyranid forms which could be scout units designed to stealth and gather what counts for intelligence from a Tyranid perspective, or they may be used en masse to deliver smaller forms such as rippers, hormagaunts, but even up to something like a carnifex, a much larger creature. More recent strains of mycetic spores have been seen to evolve sensory nodes that are shielded with ablative chitin that burns off during the orbital insertion to allow the spore to make a more accurate landing by honing in on pheromone trails released by the lictors, and when a spore of this type makes impact with the planet's surface, its outer shell will die away, peeling apart to reveal another organism inside that will then take the sustenance from the outer shell to fuel a powerful bioweapon. So these large assaulting drop pod-like spores are not the only way in which Tyranids can affect a planet from orbit. They can also release a cloud of microscopic spores which will blanket or drift down into a world's biosphere and begin to affect it without its inhabitants even becoming initially aware. They can also deploy this process more directly by what are referred to as sporocysts, and these appear as bloated fleshy pods released by bioships in low orbit, and they will float through a prey world's atmosphere until reaching the surface, whereupon they will burrow into the earth, leaving only their venting spore chimneys atop. these sporocysts
sure
will then
it will,
begin to pump billions of polluting microorganisms who begin a process of violently altering a planet's atmosphere and ecology. The role of these microscopic spores tend to be either to accelerate plant growth, thus aiding the reclamation or also digestion of a planet's biomass when a Tyranid assault eventually reaches this stage. They may also use these spores to poison life on a world, which could at pure face value appear to be counterproductive, except you must remember that a Tyranid assault's core goal is to always achieve a net positive in terms of biomass. So if they can weaken a world by poisoning some of its life, this may in turn weaken a world's resistance when the actual physical assault occurs, meaning that they will expend then less biomass, taking less casualties, so the initial poisoning effect can in turn be beneficial in the bigger picture of an entire planetary assault.
Hey, how are we doing, Bungalow? Turning into my very first exposure to WK40 ever, I remember being in junior high and seeing someone in an art class going through a codex. I didn't even know what 40k or what... it was 40k or what 40k was, till I played Dawn of War, and then I made the connection. Okay. I had a friend... So the whole reason I got into this is I had a friend who kept making references that I didn't understand, and then when I started a React channel, it was like, hey, learn about it. And I was like, okay. Now here we are.
If sporocysts detect a potential threat nearby, they can deploy spore mines or larger, deadlier mucoid spores, and there are theories that sporocysts act as psychic resonators as well, boosting the abilities of synapse creatures nearby so that they may better carry out the hive mind's commands. And even if this is merely a coincidental observation, Imperial biologists feel sure that when sporocysts are scattered across a planet's surface, they very likely form a series of synaptic staging posts to enable the higher Tyranid leader forms to better direct deployment and flow of any invasion.
Hey Wolfbane! I'm back, everybody, here to deliver some terrifying loyal at the Tyranids this time. Also helping our resident super simp for Slanesh try and win some Chaos God affection for some reason. Thank you, Wolfbane. You know, I'm just ignoring her for now, but if she comes on screen, I can't help it. 40k came out when I was 5, and it's always been in mine. It's insane. It's been out for so long, and I just never, I don't know. It just never got me. And, like, looking into it has been super interesting. Like, it's just a whole new world. Zoe been in your life. That's cool.
Another spore type is the meiotic spore, and these are more like aerial mines and appear like large sacs filled with extremely corrosive bioacid and other toxins. They also contain smaller spore mines within them. They're noted by the Imperium as appearing to perform an anti-air defense role and will detonate when they sense an enemy nearby, whereupon they will then shower their foe with razor-sharp chitin, cutting through metal and flesh with ease. The Tyranids have been known to use another air-based spore known as a mucoid spore. Reportedly, this is more explosive in nature. Lastly, there are the more commonly seen ground level spore mines, and these are usually launched from a form known as a biovore, although they can also be deployed like other spores from orbit. Their title is very generic because they seem to appear within a variety of different purposes, from spores which explode with needle-like chitin laced with poisons to pierce flesh and infect enemy, to clouds of toxic gas, and these various poisons can have a ranging and horrific effect on infantry, from extreme nerve damage like a neurotoxin to literally eating a living human alive from the inside out. To nearby onlookers, this would appear as if they were literally falling to pieces, as if suffering severe radiation damage, but in a mere matter of seconds rather than weeks, as well as various other and certainly unknown effects, from fast clotting of blood to extreme internal hemorrhaging. When it comes to Tyranids, the horrifying effects are seemingly with few limitations.
I appreciate someone who can appreciate multiple factions, so that's fine, Wolfbane.
Spore mines can also appear as fragmentation bioforms, much like human grenades and anti-personnel mines, but entirely organic. They will explode with a pressurized concussive blast and shower nearby infantry with, again, razor-sharp shell shards designed to lacerate enemy and cause extreme injury to slow down and cripple enemy forces, or, of course, to kill. But like most mines, the goal tends to be to slow down the enemy as they become overwhelmed with those needing urgent medical attention. Lastly, one of the most common features of Tyranid forms, and perhaps one of the most feared for human forces, spores can be filled with, again, Tyranid bioacid, and when spore mines are detonated near infantry, this will shower over them. The consequences are obviously usually quite horrific, dependent on just how much is showered and how nearby and well shielded the humans in the field of this blast are. Very little has been known to stop these Tyranid bioacids, and it's even said to be able to easily burn through ceramite plate used by Space Marines on their armour, so try not to get it on your skin. Spore mines often, once deployed, will drift for days, weeks or even years until an unwary foe comes near to it. Like many Tyranid forms, they do possess something of a very, very basic instinctive intelligence and are covered in sensitive feelers which seek out heat and movement. It has often been observed as well how spore mines in a cluster are seemingly linked, and so when one explodes, a chain reaction will occur. The reasons as to why the Tyranids have determined this to be the best means of their operation is unknown, but for human fighters it can actually make clearing out these mines far easier than having to deal with them singularly.
Because the blue boys do their taxes nicely, that's hilarious. Hey, Curse Knight! That has been getting better actually, but that's good.
Lastly, within the initial assault sphere of spore weaponry for Tyranids are what are known as Tyrannocytes. Now, while technically a spore, these are again another bioform of the Tyranid with some sense of sentience, although again extremely basic. They also really are the Tyranid equivalent of a drop pod, and will be launched down to a world with other forms within them. The impact of its landing causes its gravid belly to split, disgorging its other bioforms inside.
He didn't need to say disgorging. I feel like his choice of words, while descriptive, disgusting.
Once it's delivered its payload, the Tyrannocyte will very often begin then to fill itself with gas to enable it to once again float around.
If you ever want to play Dark Tide, hit me up, Sean. I'm so down.
Whereupon it will begin to then rain death upon the enemy with death spitters, barbed stranglers, and so on. Incidentally, a death splitter is a fairly standard Tyranid ranged weapon and is also typically unpleasant. As with most Tyranid forms, it's a symbiotic weapon which launches corrosive maggot creatures through muscular spasms. Wherever the maggots strike, the highly acidic fluids will splash over and dissolve through near enough anything it comes into contact with. They've also been known to take various other forms whereby the launched maggots will use this acidic layer to burrow through an inside of their victim, taking on mass and eventually bursting out through from the inside, essentially eating them alive from the inside out.
What's Space Marine 2? The Hardbind did not approve this script. Sorry, shock. Crossing my finger for a new trailer during the Game Awards. Ooh, but what is it?
So try to avoid this on the battlefield where possible. But death spitters, devourers, flesh borers, all of these are kind of Tyranid weapons, variations on a theme. They tend to be insects covered in acid which bore through you and tear you apart.
Yeah.
It seems sensible next to move on to Rippers, as they're a fairly basic Tyranid bioform and really are quite self-explanatory. Their primary focus is in devouring and shredding biomass on a world, and this does not necessarily mean they're going to be used in a battle. In fact, very often Rippers are deployed at a later stage in a Tyranid invasion, but often, of course, they may well be deployed just as a battle force equally. Overall, though, their role is actually in shredding a world to prepare it for consumption by the hive ships. Rippers, then, are mindless creatures. Their role is entirely as a service creature. Without the Tyranid synapse, they would become non-functioning and likely cannibalistic, devouring and slaughtering anything they encounter.
Well, tomorrow is Astartes, the Dawn of War 3 intro, and then we're going to look at some Warhammer memes. So that's tomorrow.
Functioning correctly, of course, they can in fact be a terrifying foe if encountered in significant numbers, as they will descend upon any and all biological life like a literal wave that will tear any and all to pieces in mere seconds.
We do have Russian Badger on the list to catch up on, because I haven't seen any Russian Badger yet, but I am planning on watching some.
Small aside, there is a secondary form of Ripper known as an eel Ripper, which tends to be seen in a planet's oceans and liquid bodies. To be clear though, Rippers do not merely just shred biological matter. They actively consume it themselves, and then later, once they are fully bloated and unfit for any kind of combat or consummation, they will steadily crawl toward what are called reclamation pools, whereupon, instead of vomiting their consumed mass into the pool, they simply hurl themselves into the pool itself, where they will then be consumed, their mass will be broken down, they're essentially dissolved and absorbed back by the hive fleet. This disturbing process is fairly typical of Tyranid forms, whereby they will readily kill themselves as the hive mind is functioning on a larger scale, knowing that these mindless drones will then simply be reprocessed into new forms, minimizing biomass wastage. Rippers, although as noted required this synapse to function correctly, have been known, if abandoned by a hive fleet before a world is fully consumed for whatever reason, are seen to burrow underground before somehow metamorphosing into a higher bioform.
Some more lore. A group of Eldar tries to leave the Milky Way to get away from your girlfriend, boyfriend, I don't know, Slanesh, because they realise she only exists in the Milky Way. But when they left the Milky Way, they came back as Genestealers, and they tried to take over the Eldar, and they were promptly destroyed. Well, fuck them. Also, Rick, listening to this while you put together your books, thank you, Ricky. I appreciate that.
This has led some within the biologists to make highly speculative conclusions that Rippers are something of a pluripotent form. This is the theory that they could change into any kind of Tyranid creature with the right signals from the hive mind, kind of similarly to a stem cell. This means they could become hive tyrants, they could become Genestealers, lictors, anything. Alternatively, it could be just another emergency trigger built into these lesser forms to ensure that they maximize their worth. Ordinarily, their role is simplistic, to be consumed back into the gross mass of the hive fleet. But if that's not possible and they're abandoned, their value will change into the continuing resistance and assault against whatever enemy remains on a planet.
I don't need his choice of words. I appreciate his lexis. His vocabulary is fantastic, but he is very descriptive in this one.
So these lesser forms are better to use what biomass and energy they contain by changing themselves into a form which can continue to weaken a world, with the goal, presumably, of making it easier for the fleet to continue its assault when and if it returns, although of course this remains entirely speculative. I will add on here as well, within the sphere of Rippers is a form known as a Cortex Leech. It's not technically a Ripper, but it is Ripper-like. It's smaller, but in some ways more disturbing. They will attach themselves onto the face of their victim and then insert long feelers into the brain cavity of their victims via the eyes, nose and ears. Disturbingly though, not through the mouth, meaning anyone observing nearby would have to endure the stomach-turning scream of the victims, that is until of course these feelers penetrate and begin manipulating their host's brain, then forcing them to become a drooling drone-like puppet under the synapse control of the hive mind. Essentially, they become Tyranid zombies.
Alright, who here watches Futurama? And who here just thought about the brain slugs? I watched a lot of Futurama. Some kind of hybrid between human and Tyranid, that could dominate and control the hive fleets of all hive fleets. You know what? Fuck it. Like, why wouldn't you try and do that? If you could control these things, you could wreck shit. Wreck-It Ralph would have nothing on you.
Some genus of Tyranid are incredibly broad and many forms that fall within a general genetic sphere, with only very small differences between them to distinguish, enable them to fulfill specialized roles. Not unlike how, say, a regular army may have assault units, heavy weapon teams, and so on. And this is the role taken by what are known as gaunts. They're often fairly small in comparative size to other Tyranids, and they take on a role of essentially the highly adaptable frontline unit who appear in very large numbers, wielding again a highly flexible range of weapons. Some of the most well-known gaunt types are Hormogaunts, Spine Gaunt, Termagant, Hypergaunts, Night Gaunt, Death Gaunt. There are very many. There are also those less well studied like the Hellgaunts, Terragaunts, Slashgaunts, Razorgaunts, Crucigants, Exigants, Malgaunts, Mortargaunts, Rendergaunts, Protogaunts, Paragaunts, Lashgaunts, Genagaunts, Toxigaunts.
How does he remember all of these?
My, what a lot of gaunts there are.
A lot of
also note
gaunts.
that there is a flying Tyranid form known as a gargoyle that can be considered within the gaunt genus, as it appears much like a flying termagant. However, others within the family of gargoyles, such as the harpy, do not align with this gaunt form, so whilst you could include them, I think generally they're better to sit within their own sphere. Basically, the gaunts are immense and numerous, and fulfill a role of being highly flexible and greatly disposable. They are the archetypal Tyranid assault unit. Some of those lesser known are likely due to the fact that Tyranids are able to tailor their forces, like we said, to specific engagements. So some forms may be documented via Imperial data cores, which are then sent deep into a planet for later recovery, essentially a kind of planetary black box. And when these are studied by the Inquisition or the biologists, they may reference specific gaunt types which are documented but then will never be seen again. It may be that the hive was experimenting with a new form and then decided to scrap this for whatever reason. In terms of the more common basic gaunt types though, the most well known is of course the termagant. Termagants are fast, agile and cunning little creatures. They often barely span more than 2 meters head to tail and are believed by the biologists to have originally been servicing in the defense of the hive ships, and so their size was designed to occupy the arterial passages of the bioships in search of intruders. But now they will take a core role in planetary invasions, and termagants will usually accompany larger Tyranid warriors, who will commonly wield what are known as the fairly self-explanatory weapon titled as flesh borers. Termagants appear to have a very close relationship with the Tyranid warrior class and will react instantly to any enemy that threatens their larger kin, drowning the foe in overwhelming numbers. The specific reason for this though are unknown, but given the Tyranid warriors are a known synapse creature, it's logical that they should be programmed to behave in this manner as a reflexive instinct. Although often seen in vast numbers, underestimating the very humble termagant is a grave error. They're more cunning than they may appear and will often seek to circumvent a direct assault, so that the last thing you will see will be a wave of thousands of termagants descending onto your position, seemingly out of nowhere, and by then it's too late. At the same time, like all Tyranid forms, they are very expendable when necessary, and their sheer weight of numbers means they will often be used as fodder, thrust directly at enemy positions to draw fire away from the more complex and powerful enemies approaching behind the front line or positioning themselves on enemy flanks. So termagants are a very simple Tyranid form, but play a highly flexible and critical role in their invasions.
Bungalow, I am so down. I'm so down. You just need to put it into the comments after the video ends. I keep all recommendations. I have a list of everyone who's recommended and what they've recommended. That's why in the description you will always see the people that have recommended these specific videos. And I would be totally down. Now the terrifying thing is who's controlling the hive. We've never seen who's the big brain of the operation. Imagine if there is like a sentient being that's just controlling all the bugs. Like, imagine, who would it be? And what kind of power would they have? 1 galaxy's worth of biomass versus 1 galaxy worth of Tyranids. You could arm everyone and still not have the numbers they do. True. But yeah, like, imagine if there's just a sentient being, giant bug person who controls everything.
And then, as noted, the Hormagaunts are another extremely common archetypal form of Tyranid. They're incredibly single-minded, and the Hormagaunts' near sole focus is on 2 things: moving extremely fast and slaughtering its enemy by eviscerating them with scythe-like talon and claws. They will move generally in massive swarms, using their dense numbers to seemingly take continual fire from defenders whilst barely appearing to take any noticeable losses at all. Hormagaunts have been long studied by the biologists, and they're believed to be a specialized iteration of the termagant bioform. However, unlike the termagant, they tend to be most commonly using only physical razor-sharp claws and scythes, not ranged symbiotic weaponry. A Hormagaunt will not only kill its prey though, but they will also then immediately feed upon them after killing. Its metabolism enables it to continually power toward enemies with lightning speed, and this process of kill, gorge, assault drives it to constantly seek out and feast upon fresh prey. They're often used as a frontline unit not only because of their aggression, speed and numbers, but because their natural instincts are usually enough for them to carry out a successful assault.
Alright, listen. I don't like a spider in my bathroom. I don't want these in my world. I'm with the Necrons. When you say Astartes, do you mean the video or the subject on them? I don't know, it was really requested and he said it's only like 10 minutes. Hyena! Hello! Guys, when we say Astartes, Sean, you're the one who put this in. Do you mean the videos or the subject?
actually require very little input from the hive mind, and so they don't require proximity with larger synapse forms like the warriors or the tyrants. Gaunts in general are most often deployed in tyrannocytes, and the reason being that it's highly likely that in the early stages of a planetary assault, many of these pods will be destroyed by orbital defences before they're able to make planetfall. Thus, it is very logical for these drop pods to be filled with very highly expendable gaunt bioforms.
Me and the Necrons agree on quite a bit of stuff, to be fair. I don't think I'll ever be a Necron simp, but like, I think we could be homies. The Necrons invented a galaxy-wide map which is interactive. That sounds cool as fuck.
The more complex and less expendable medium-sized forms will follow later when a planet has become more preoccupied with the situation on the ground. Also, whilst being expendable, the Gaunt should again not be underestimated. Cool. In fact, this carpet bombing approach in the early stages of a Tyranid assault is perfectly within their biomass efficiency calculations, because even if a minimal number of the pods are able to reach the surface, then the Gaunts which thrust forth will very quickly escalate into a serious problem for a world's defenders, and the primary reason being that unlike many other Tyranid forms, Gaunts are actually able to reproduce asexually independently themselves, and they will lay hundreds of eggs in the early stage of their life cycle just below a planet's surface, so that although their lifespan is short and hyper-aggressive, a new swarm will already be hatching and laying and growing and assaulting, and the cycle will only continue exponentially, meaning that unless they are eradicated almost on landing, the situation will very quickly become a highly demoralizing downward spiral for the defenders of a world who will only seemingly have to engage with more and more Gaunts with each wave that assaults their citadels. Once a Tyranid hive ship begins to deploy its medium synapse creatures and heavy rear-line artillery units, along with potentially the truly terrifying titanic biomachines, an Imperial or indeed any world will be by now usually bunkered into their cities and heavily on the defensive, whilst oceans of Gaunts lash the planet's surface.
At that point, it's exterminators. If there was that many bugs on my planet, I'd be like, right, let's dip.
Hunting for anything of a sentient living state. And Gaunts will collectively use a variety of weapons ranged and melee, and these have been defined as primarily 6 types: the Flesh Borer, Devourer, Scythe Talons, Spine Fists, Strangle Webs, and Spike Rifles.
Hey, I heard a bit about what he did. He blew up 3 worlds to try and get rid of the opportunity for them to grow. I vibe it. I don't think that was a bad thing.
While all fairly self-explanatory, there are interesting details within each weapon. Firstly, the very well-known Flesh Borer is a ranged weapon and is essentially a portable brood nest for sharp-fanged borer beetles. These beetles are kept in their mature state in a hormone-induced dormancy until the weapon is ready to be fired. Like all the Tyranid weapons, they form a symbiotic connection at a neural level with the wielder, meaning that neural impulses from the wielder will, in this weapon's situation, force one of the insects into a firing sphincter. From here, the beetle can be fired at a target by a further impulse, and when fired, a frenzied borer beetle will hurtle itself forward with a powerful kick of its flea-like legs.
I'm really... Right, I just want to state, Bungaloo, I am so happy that you asked that of the chat and not of me, because I've got no clue, but I'll be interested in reading the response to that. Thank you for watching 49 minute on the First Legion Dark Angels. I am going to be watching the Dark Angels this week. The reason why is because I know half of the people that come to my lives are Dark Angels and I want to understand more about them. So I'm 100% looking into the Dark Angels. We'll be happy to watch the Voldemort one if that's the one that's the most popular. Funny you should mention that an Inquisitor tried to lure the Tyranids in and then exterminise the planet to try and kill the Hive Fleet. He thought that if he kept destroying planets eventually, they'd die off. The Inquisition literally fired this game and we can retire because you can't keep blowing up planets. Silent King is bros with Sanguinius.
It's not launched by pressure, it actually launches itself. The beetle then spends all of its remaining life energy boring through the armour, the flesh and the bone of their enemy. The beetle itself is by design blind, having been specifically bioengineered to lessen any possible deviation in its flight path. They also will secrete a potent digestive enzyme upon impact with the target, aiding the penetration of armor and flesh. Not that it would necessarily need to be understood in a true sense, but quite obviously these weapons also have the impact of evoking terror and horror within
How we doing, Iron Kiko?
Enemies of the Tyranid. By the nature of its biological ammunition, a flesh borer can easily be adapted by the hive fleet to counter specific defences. One example would be the bizarre Screamer Beetle, designed purely to sow terror and confusion amongst the enemy ranks, unleashing an ear-splitting shriek as it's propelled through the air at high speed. Massed salvos of Screamer Beetles give rise to a nightmarish cacophony that is enough to shred the nerves of all but the most grizzled veteran warriors, and other forms might explode on impact with powerful acids or even
after Major Kill's video, I already watched Major Kill's video. I've got next is 5 times that Tyranids were fucking terrifying, and then I've got a story about Genestealers, and that's everything for today after this. Because it was supposed to be in one stream, but obviously I pussied out due to pain. I apologise again. I'm not going to get into the fact that I'm a fucking pussy, but like, I will gladly look into those though. And oh, okay. I could watch those together. I'd be down.
Ignite, dousing their victims in biofuel before somehow self-igniting them. Then comes the Devourer. And this is another weapon which does exactly what it says on the tin. If the flesh borer was unpleasant, then the Devourer is its doubled down iteration. Its appearance is that of a conical lump of partly rotted flesh escaping from a chitin maw. Infested by writhing flesh worms with shiny black heads, when the weapon is triggered, a bioelectrical jolt hurls a shower of these creatures at the enemy with immense force. They will either shatter on impact, spraying their foe with acid, or more often pierce their victim, where they will then immediately start burrowing into the flesh, eating their way through the victim's neurological tissues and move to the spinal column on into the brain.
Disgusting. Okay, I get you now, Kirst. Iron Keto, NIDS trigger your insectophobia. I'm not surprised. I was saying I do not like having a fucking spider in my bathroom. Like, this is like that to a new level. This is spiders in my galaxy. But funny enough, the orcs are currently holding their own and they're both in a stalemate, and if they both win or either side wins, the galaxy just ends. That's actually kind of funny. Imagine. Who would you want to win, orcs or Tyranids? Because I'm team orc. Big bug, no chance. Orc, wah.
To no surprise, instantaneous panic followed by madness will follow as a result of the unbearable and unescapable agony caused by this process, so severe that usually suicide by their own weapon is not even possible. Only the mercy of their comrades would be all that one could hope for. Were it not for the speed of death, this process is surely enough to drive the victim almost entirely insane. Once the bugs reach the victim's brain, they will then proceed to, you guessed it, devour it. And when we come to the strangle web, it should be noted that this was a weapon seen in the past to be wielded by the lower Tyranid forms such as the termagant, but these have been seen less and less. Usually the only iteration of this, known as the barbed strangler, is now seen on larger bioforms like the Carnifex or Tyrannocytes. The strangle web, though, was a small and bizarre looking creation formed a composite of a creature between something of a weapon and spider. It would fire masses of sticky strands which would wrap themselves around their victim, primarily to immobilize them, not kill them, and the more that they would struggle, though, the tighter this bioweb would become, and this could continue even up to a point where it would eventually literally strangle them to death.
But I heard that Vulcan's next come back after Lion, so who knows? Probably the best look into Imperium politics I've seen. Ooh, that sounds interesting. Well, here's the thing. If the Tyranids win against the Orcs, and the Tyranids have been strengthened up after years of combat with the Orcs, talking about thousands of years of combat, you don't really understand what this lore is about yet, but it's giant space bugs that will kill you, will eat you, and will use your biological material to make themselves better and worse. And they would be too powerful, too well fed, too strong, too well maintained. But the Orcs, when after decades of combat, they keep evolving, the more they fight, game over. get you. But I still think Boogie Boy no chance. Orc win. Orc!
It's believed though that the focus for these weapons was less on lethality and more for capturing live victims for return to the hive ships. Then we come to the last of the gaunt projectiles, and these were again used primarily by termagants and are known as the spike rifles, which are not unlike many Tyranid weapons, almost comically overpowered, and this is very much by design. They not only fire what are essentially a razor sharp harpoons, but these are also covered with razor sharp barbs to then shred whatever they penetrate, usually causing huge bleeding of the victims. This though is another weapon seen less commonly now by the gaunt form, who seem to more often favour either the flesh borer or the devourer.
There's only one thing that stopped a hive free dead in its tracks through sheer attrition. Guess. Okay. Nurgle. Also, I read your messages. Whoop, there it is. But I don't know. So yeah, I'm going to guess Nurgle. So that's why the Raven Guard and the Official Assassinorum keep fighting until a logical plan is erected. Like, they make sure that neither side has an upper hand. They're hoping to find probably a way to kill them both. Ah, a CC, very powerful one from the Dark Age of technology. Ah, okay, Orcs. To remove that problem, I'll just get the Necrons to do it. Necron should do it. Lilcum was the beast must die. He is somewhere in the Imperium just hiding. When might you watch more videos on the Emperor? I have a few videos made on him by Voldemort and a series called Mistake of the Emperor by Old Man, who will help you understand him. So, I hate the Emperor, so probably very soon. Because when else am I going to theory craft my hatred and destruction of the Emperor? Or my Emperor as a baby series?
Lastly, we have the slightly misleading Spine Fist, which sounds as if it would yet again be quite self-explanatory.
Okay.
Except that a Spine Fist is not as it sounds. It's not a melee weapon for merely punching into an enemy. Those would be more like the rending and crushing claws seen in other Tyranid forms. No, the Spine Fist is in fact a projectile weapon, albeit one designed for more close-range engagements. Its name is given because of its appearance, where it is seen to wrap around its user's wrist. But like most Tyranid weapons, it is a symbiotic form and is seen to be mostly typically carried in pairs. They will connect to the airways of its host by a long tube-like tail that burrows through the host's limb into their torso, and a Spine Fist carapace is arranged into rows of diamond-hard spines, and these are lethally coated with neurotoxins.
I'm kind of down for the hive mind eating the Emperor.
Another common feature of Tyranid weapons, which will assault the nervous system of the victim and are fired by a sharp exhalation of the host. Thus, a larger and more powerful host can exhale more spines in each salvo, ripping through the flesh of any caught victims.
A, I'm a psycho. B, he was a dick before he became a vegetable. 3, as a vegetable, things are done in his name that I simply can't abide by. D, he's still a dick, even past that point. Like, 5, he shouldn't have killed the only other person who could sit on the throne. F, he wanted a monopoly on the world, which I don't agree with. And G, he tried to wipe out all religion, which ostensibly I don't believe in because I'm pro-freedom of religion.
And then we come to what are known as Tyranid scythe talons, which are to no surprise, again, relatively straightforward.
And he's opposite Slaanesh, and Slaanesh is, oh!
These are less seen on the termagant and more by the other gaunts, most commonly of course the Hormagaunt, and these along with their teeth and sharpened chitin bodies are their only real weapons. But scythe talons are generally a very common Tyranid weapon overall, and it's no surprise because most Tyranids will have at least some form of sharp and extremely toughened chitin melee weapon, which they will use to terrifying efficiency in close quarters, and they'll be backed by dense muscles which power them into their enemy and are very capable of piercing or carving through the heaviest armour wielded by the Imperium, including Ceramite of the Astartes.
Hey, how'd you avoid a Genestealer? Wear a belt. I stole that joke from the last stream. It's not my joke, I'm sorry, but it was a good one and it made me laugh. If you're down for the hive mind, you should join the Genestealers. These Genestealer cults are terrifying. Khakis. Hey, real Dadoom! Well, yeah, that's also a way to... well, that's not a way to stop Genestealers, but it's a way to avoid them, wear khakis. I said that, Sean, I literally said that joke was stolen from the previous stream. I have 100% admitted that I stole that joke. I just liked it. How is bug education going? I believe well. I'm learning a lot. I've learned a lot. This video is nearly done. We're now, like, this is the thing. We're getting past the lore, and then we're going to get into the terrifying thing. I'm going to hear a bunch of stories of why they're terrifying, and then I'm going to watch an entire thing on the Genestealer. And, like, we've done most of the education part. I get what they are. I understand how they interact with the world. And then we're going to go into how they're fucking terrifying. And we're going to sit here and we're all going to go to bed at night, staring at the bug on our ceiling going, swear to God, if you're a Tyranid, I'm going to kill you.
So I thought it would be fun to return with and finish this episode with an ancient piece of Tyranid lore, something not heavily documented in the modern tomes of the Imperial Biologist's reading. And we'll finish back around with this piece of knowledge related again to the Norn Queens of Tyranid hive fleets. The Tyranids have come to devour all biomatter they encounter, this we know, but they also seek genetic material to feed their Norn Queens and continue to develop and strengthen their hive fleets. So it's not heavily documented, but early studies by the biologists are suggestive that the Tyranids do not simply shred all planetary biomatter and those who live upon a world, but will instead often take living captives and bring them back upon their hive ships.
I have heard about corn. I've heard bits, but I don't know enough about corn yet to comment. But the thing is, that makes you say, how do I put this? Use pheromone to being infected by the Genestealer virus. Any guy or girl you run into, let's just say you'll do Slanesh things. Nice. I now cannot go outside or inside without bug repellent in my hand. That's so funny. Games Workshop and Blizzard hadn't fallen out StarCraft and World of Warcraft. Would have been the Warhammer games. I've heard about that actually. Isn't StarCraft like incredibly shit though? But I love World of Warcraft. So, spoiler, I'm a huge World of Warcraft fan, and I really wish Blizzard like hadn't been shit in like the personal stuff, because I absolutely love Warcraft, but can't get over the fact that they literally just they had so much fucking sexual harassment suits that it was like, yo, can I support them? And like, I don't know, I kind of got stuck in a place with that. But I grew up heavy on Warcraft. Like, the original Warcraft, well, this is what I'm saying. Blizzard are not nice people, but Warcraft was like my shit growing up. It was the game that I played like so hard. Like, it was, I spent days on that game, I spent weeks on that game, I spent months on that game. I gave so much time to that. I started with so many free trials, and I just kept going, hey, Alpaca. Well, I would definitely watch that. I'm down to, as long as you put it in the comments, try one raid, it's free. Oh, I was always the Alliance, believe it or not. I know, because I'm Horde right now, that might be hard to see, but I was actually either a mage or a paladin for the Alliance. But yeah, I spent years and years in WoW. Like, no joke, like, years of real life in WoW. I'm sorry, Shark. I'm sorry. No fucking way we've got 420 subscribers. No fucking way. Happy 420! You know what that means? Wait, that means we've gained 100 subscribers in the last 4 days. And also, same for me, Sean. Same. But yeah, we've gained 100 subscribers in the last 4 days. That is insane. What are we doing? This was to celebrate 4K watch hours this week. Maybe Slim Pie Slanesh will notice me now. Maybe. This is magical. It is magical. I agree. But yeah, thank you so much. Y'all are insane. Listen here, Liam. I knew we got along for a reason. Me and the Warhammer crew. I knew it. I knew it. I knew it. Okay, let's get back on the books because I want to listen to the short stories.
It is presumed that they will then directly feed these to the Norn Queen, who will ingest the still living victims before genetically breaking them apart and absorbing their DNA to feed into the pool of genetic knowledge used by the Hive fleet, as well as sharing this information with other Norn Queens. However, it is also believed that not all captives are fed to the Norn Queen.
What? Wolfbane, I love you. I talk to you every day. What do you mean? I am. I'm always proud. It's true. And see, this is the thing. WK is like fire on the algorithm, but also not fire on the algorithm. My most disliked pieces of all my content is my live streams. But I have so much fun that fuck them. Because I don't care. I hang out with you guys. I get to chat. Some people would rather... You always give me a thumbs down, I believe you. Some people would rather I just watch the thing and react. But I love speaking to you guys. And Curse Night, what? I don't know. Like, people can thumbs down all they like because I really love this style of thing. That's why I started doing the Sunday one. Because A, I get to know you guys. B, you get to know me. C, I am first and foremost a streamer before a video maker. Because I was on Twitch before I was ever on YouTube. I sat and played games for like the last year on Twitch. Like, that's where my comfort lies, interacting with a community and becoming bros. Because, like, the whole point of having a community is basically developing a bunch of bros. No, I'm not telling you to thumbs down, Hyena. I'm saying I mostly get thumbs downs. Total Slanesh abused me mentally. It's fine. I'd rather devote myself to Corn than Slanesh. Damn you! No, I'm joking. It's fine. I'm just a Slanesh stan. I'm not a filthy degenerate, my good sir. I am a noble citizen of the Imperium. I still love you. Don't worry, Wolfbane. It's easier to answer questions live because reading comments sometimes bring up more questions. Exactly. And I have my latency at ultra low so that I can still respond to you as fast as possible. So, like, when you put it in the chat is near enough when I see it. Well, thank you, Shock. I appreciate that. But yeah, the reason I, like, react so quickly is I have all my settings to the lowest possible so there can be the least amount of latency so that I can respond as near enough when you guys speak to me. Because that's what I'm used to on Twitch and that's what I'm comfortable with. Because I don't want it to be that I'm answering a question from 30 seconds ago. I'm not going to remember. Like, why would you remember? So, I like having the instantaneous, but we still have the chat on screen so that y'all can see that I can see any messages I'm missing and y'all can see the reaction in real time.
Some are sacrificed to breeding programs, and it will be their grisly, unfortunate fate to become hosts for immature grubs or the larvae of bioconstructs. Some victims are not immediately needed for consumption, and so they will preserve these forms for later use via shroud spinners, who will weave an anesthetizing cocoon to envelop the victim, keeping them alive until later needed. Now you may think, how could the biologist possibly have gained such knowledge? Well, to be sure, some of it is speculative, but generally this has been observed when Imperial troops of unbelievable strength and bravery, including of course Space Marines, have somehow managed to assault a Tyranid ship and still lived to tell of it. And in doing so, they sometimes encountered whole chambers of cocooned human victims, which then brings us to one specific creature that is said to feed upon a captive during its larval stage, known as the parasitic mind slaver. Now, Tyranids are well known for controlling other bioforms, as we discussed earlier with the cortex leeches, and this kind of behaviour can also be seen when Genestealer cults spring up. And again, this is a form of Tyranid mind control. But But aboard Tyranid ships, they will utilize a creature known as a mind slaver. Now this in some respects is somewhat of a misnomer, because this bioform is actually used to enable Tyranids to gain temporary control over other critical biomachines which have malfunctioned or become damaged, so they're really kind of repair organisms. But the mind slaver takes over the individual mind of the biomachine if it has some sentience to it, to prevent it from causing further damage to either itself or other systems. This will then allow the hive mind to control its functions until it's able to resume its standard role. And again, one might question, well, why don't they simply just replace it? Well, presumably within a hive ship, some of their biomechanical systems are either too complex, too critical, or just difficult to produce. Perhaps.
Well, I hope to have war with you another day, Curse Knight. And thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate you. Thank you for the recommendations. Thank you for the questions. It's been super interesting. I hope you have a great night. Something's corpse emperor. Oh, alpaca, you sitting too? Nice.
Dangerous to replace whilst the living hive ship. The reasons are not especially clear, but any number of speculations could adequately explain why the Tyranids choose this process, and presumably there are many instances where they're able to make straight replacements. But it's important as always to keep in mind that the Tyranids' primary function above all things is to minimize biomass wastage and to ensure things are achieved as efficiently as possible, and it may simply be that it is more efficient to repair something than it is to replace it. But the designation of mind slaver comes from, again, humans, who somehow were able to bear witness to the inner workings of a hive ship, whereby they observed some humans carrying out tasks around a hive ship, seemingly as part of the hive itself. They moved around unmolested and were extremely hostile to those attempting to save them. Biologists have discovered that the parasitic larval form of the creature is about the size of a pea or small pebble, and that when the egg laid by the Norn Queen is introduced into a living captive, it will then burrow into its victim's skull and attach itself to the base of the medulla.
Nice.
At first, the immature creature is not powerful enough to influence its host, but as it becomes stronger, the hive mind will begin to seep into the host's brain and eventually take over and direct all of the creature's higher brain functions, and these victims are designated as mind slaves. Their actions and thoughts are completely controlled by the Tyranid hive mind, and it's entirely unknown the level of conscious awareness these victims will then have of what is happening to them, and one would hope that this is minimal if any, although given the standard fare of 40k creatures and consequences, this seems perhaps unlikely. So for fun, let's just say they're fully aware and they feel everything. And then eventually, the mind slaver will outgrow and need to destroy its host by bursting out through the head like an exploding melon. But until it does so, the mind slave will, as was noted, move about the ship and perform tasks under the direction of the hive mind. If the ship is attacked, the mind slaves will be among the first to move to its defense, being the most expendable, especially if they belong to an armed warrior race whose fighting skills may be usefully employed by the Tyranids. It's been noted that the Tyranids seem not especially fussy about which sentient forms they use in these roles, as the Eldar, Orcs, even Chaos Marines have been observed wandering the cavities of Tyranid ships.
I literally said this in the last one, Real da Doom. It's so alien that it's funny.
The ultimate fate of a mind slave, as noted, is to simply become a segment in the life cycle of the mind slaver. Once they begin to mature, they appear more like a large crab who will then wander through the small functional pipes of a hive ship, attaching itself when required to a system which needs to be constrained. When the parasitic form has eventually reached its stage of near maturity, its host head will now appear extremely distended, with flesh tearing apart, ripped like fabric. But before completely leaving the host, the mind slaver excretes a chemical designed to encysst the host, which will then form a sheath around them, while inside the body will then quickly be dissolved, liquefied essentially, and the mind slaver in its final parasitic stage will feed off of this soup before it completes its life cycle as a mature Tyranid.
My cat will always meow at cats. I vibe it. Dorian's playing GTA, I'm not surprised. Yeah, Aristotle, we don't allow links in chat. Since someone sent me a video of a woman deep throating a cucumber, we do not allow them. It's evolved over time, but that's its core. My Malamute just knocked my phone out of my hand after that meow. I'm sorry. But B is kind of cute. Got some interesting story about Genestealers. Orcs can't become Genestealers because they can suss them out. Eldar can't become a Genestealer because, you know, they're all about chastity. But didn't the ones who left the Milky Way come back as Genestealers?
Bioform. So as we come to the end today, I will aim to return relatively soon with the next installment of this series. Likely this will encompass us looking at more medium scale forms of the Tyranid, as well as perhaps the infrastructure bioforms. Then we can move on to the larger creatures. Lastly, we can look in on the Titanic scale and fleet ships. After this, I would imagine delving in onto something like Genestealers. This is a good place to begin with specific studies, although maybe this can come in the next one before we continue with the overview. But as always, remember, by the time you see the skies turning dark as the Tyranid hive ship blocks out the sun, you begin to see showers of spores flying down through the atmosphere, the chances are that no one's there to save you. And very likely an emergency call that was sent out will never have reached anyone, as they will have been blocked by the psychic shadow cast by the Tyranids, which inhibit any warp message and travel for escape. Beware the great devourer. For as one chaplain of the Astartes was once heard to say, we must scour them from the stars before they do the same to us.
Alright, you guys ready? 5 times Tyranids were beyond horrifying. That was Luton. It was a very good video. I appreciated it. But are we ready to hear why they are so horrifying? So when they do have children, it's kind of like backing your soul into these stones. They can put the stones in the body cloned for you in a vat. Oh, weird. Also, fuck you, alpaca. This is B. If anyone hasn't met B yet, this is B.
The 40k universe is an incredibly dark place. The 40k universe is an incredibly dark place that is filled with some horrifying characters and stories. Now, potentially, one of the most terrifying species in the entire galaxy is that of the Tyranids themselves. An unthinking, unquestioning swarm of quintillions of Lovecraftian monsters that descend upon unsuspecting worlds and strip them of all life, rendering everything organic into a slurry of biological matter that they can then use to create more monsters. To say that the Tyranids are horrifying is a massive understatement, but today, we're going to be examining 5 different stories that show just how scary they truly are. From an organism that kills its prey in the most horrific way imaginable, to a horrific short story that shows what it's like to be eaten alive by a continent-sized hive ship. And speaking of eating, this video sponsor knows a thing or two about good food, so a quick shout out to them, and then we're going to dive headfirst into the grimdark. Sometimes life can get pretty
I like food, but I'm not gonna promote whatever you're selling. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, bro. But good for you, Warhammer, for having a sponsor.
The terror of the Molnthrope. So to kick this video off, we're going to start with something that isn't exactly a story. It's more a specific Tyranid organism.
Wait. Also, it's not weird that they all die. Use souls for everything. As you know, they put them in giant mechs. They put them in. It's an AI backup. They get wisdom from the Eldars because they can't keep cloning. Okay.
One whose description is absolutely chilling. So the Molnthrope is a relatively newly discovered Tyranid species, often confused with its smaller cousin, the Zoanthrope. It is a bizarre creation that seems to serve the purpose of collecting and organizing different forms of genetic material for the hive fleets. It does this in order for the fleet to gain new insight into how to create ever more horrifying new bioforms. They take the role of a battlefield researcher or scientist, rather than a warrior species. Much like how the Drukhari homunculi will often take to the battlefield in search of new specimens to take back to their hellish and depraved laboratories for experimentation. Nice. No one really knew these things existed for the longest time, because their role dictated that they would only appear when the Tyranids had been successful in their attack. If humanity was able to fight off the Tyranid invasion, then there would be no reason for a Molnthrope to appear. Meaning for centuries, anyone who witnessed one of these hellish creatures didn't survive to give a report.
I just want to state, Bestial, also welcome in, makes a fantastic point. Keep sticking those souls into soul stones till a Zoanthrope gets in there, eats everything and becomes a psychic god. Bottom the two at bed since the moment you were a child in order for the stone to take little pieces of your soul as you grow up, and then when you die, your soul fully goes into the stone. Weird. Also, Slanesh, you got my attention. I love how anytime you guys mention chaos, you mention the possibility of Slaanesh because you know it'll get my attention. I feel like I'm being tricked. Would that make him a stone zoanthrope? Well, we are on 420 followers.
The way the Molnár kills their prey is what makes them so disturbing. Once it has you in its grasp, it will inject you with a truly terrifying venom that is cardiotoxic, neurotoxic, and dermonecrotic. The venom causes waves of excruciating pain to pulse through the victim's body and eventually completely disable them. The Molnár then takes the unlucky creature into the bloated sacs around its torso, where the victim's genetic material will slowly be extracted and processed. To be captured alive by one of these creatures is to be subjected to a horrific and painful existence. And worst of all, not be allowed to die, as it slowly digests you and tears you apart molecule by molecule, atom by atom, every individual piece of you being absorbed and cataloged. You can think of the Molnár as a living organic jail cell that's also part torture chamber and research lab. At any given time, it can have dozens of different victims inside the mini sacs covering its body, each one slowly being absorbed. The worst part about being captured by one of these things is to know that you will face untold agonies without even the hope of death to give you comfort, as to have been captured by a Molnár means that there are no defenders left alive that could possibly free you from its clutches. The unknown prisoner of the Xenos Bestiarium. Within the infamous Xenos Bestiarium of the Death Watch are held captive aliens that have been kept under lock and key in order to be better studied. These prisoners are relentlessly subjected to invasive tests by the members of its apothecaria, whether that be through dissection and examination, to learn the anatomical secrets of how to better destroy members of their species in the future, or to be released into the hunting grounds for the Death Watch to hone their skills against. This is a dark and secretive place where any secrets an alien may possess will be extracted from it by force. Over the years, the Bestiarium has housed hundreds of thousands of different aliens, and each and every one of them has been categorized by different threat levels, spanning from infrared to ultraviolet. The Bestiarium is home to an unparalleled level of knowledge, and thus, Inquisitors are known to frequent here in order to gain valuable insight into their own investigations.
Is the videos on the Bestiarium? Because I think I'd find that really interesting. How much can I bench? I used to be able to deadlift like 120 kilograms, but not anymore.
Amongst the various holding cells within the Bestiarium, one of them seemingly remains empty, but has been placed at threat level ultraviolet, indicating that whatever is inside is considered by the Death Watch to be one of the most dangerous threats in the galaxy. It is kept in Zone Violet, which is maximum security taken to a whole new level. A breach of this area would be absolutely catastrophic, and the nightmarish monsters that can be found here can never be allowed to escape. Whatever this thing is, it was captured on the sometimes described as haunted world of Jove's Descent in 814 M41. A Death Watch kill team had gone to the planet to investigate numerous suspicious disappearances. They set up a stasis trap in an area they believed was the logical hunting ground of whatever was responsible for the disappearances. Several days later, they returned to find that the trap had been sprung, and it registered that something was in fact inside of it. However, upon investigation, the Death Watch kill team could detect no creature inside of the stasis field. Puzzled, they sought to determine if there was a malfunction with the trap's machine spirit, but everything seemed to be fully operational. The kill team transferred it unopened to the Xenos Bestiarium for further study. Even upon expert examination, whatever was inside was completely invisible and unable to be detected by even the most sensitive equipment that the Death Watch had. Just to be safe, the trap itself was sealed inside one of the cells and placed under maximum security. It was then that the trap was intentionally allowed to fail in order to bait the creature out. This, however, proved to be unsuccessful, as whatever was inside was exceptionally cunning and intelligent. They theorized that it was most likely a member of the Tyranid species, based upon the planet's location in space, and that it was likely a form of lictor or Genestealer, which had absolutely perfect camouflaging abilities, chameleonic powers that are believed to be psychic in nature. Whatever this thing was, it was somehow able to prevent the human mind from registering its presence when viewed directly, or through even the most fine-tuned augers and sensors that the Imperium possessed. They theorized that it was also possible that whatever was inside had evolved to be able to literally phase in and out of existence.
That's not good for us!
Which, if true, would give the creature the ability to walk unhindered through solid walls, meaning that the trap itself, and even its holding cell, would be viewed as a childish and primitive construct to this entity, that it remained inside of its cell simply for its own amusement. Paranoia on what this thing was, or if there even was anything inside the trap at all, had grown more fevered over the years. Many members of the Death Watch have volunteered to sacrifice themselves, willingly entering the chamber unarmed to bait the creature into attacking them. But as of today, the Chamber of Vigilance is still weighing its options on what to do. The Doom of Molnár. The creature known as the Doom of Molnár was a uniquely adapted Tyranid zoanthrope that managed to bring down an entire craft world, mostly single-handedly. And the way it did this is not only terrifying, but has enormous implications on the future of the Tyranid species. So first, a little backstory on the craft world of Molnár itself. So the craft worlds of Molnár, Iandan, and Idhare had formed an alliance with one another. They encountered a splinter of Hive Fleet Behemoth that would later become known as a Hive Fleet in its own right, Hive Fleet Naga, or the Endless Winding Serpent to the Eldar. It had encroached on one of the largest and most prosperous of the Exodite worlds. The three craft worlds sent fleets to help them fend it off, but when they arrived, the planet had almost been completely overrun. Its world spirit had been consumed, and most of its population was already dead. Determined to enact their vengeance, they launched an all-out assault on the greater bioships, for it was believed that if those ships were destroyed, the rest of the fleet would not be able to function. Even though the Eldari took enormous losses, they were eventually successful. The bioships were destroyed, and all of the smaller Tyranid vessels became uncoordinated and reverted back into an animalistic nature. Over the coming years, the united force of Eldari would dedicate themselves entirely to cleansing the sector of all of the leftover Tyranids, eventually believing and celebrating that they had been completely wiped out. And although for the Eldar, this was a bittersweet moment of celebration, it was ultimately premature, as the Eldari of Craftworld Molnár would suffer a truly horrific fate. For although it seemed Naga had been completely wiped out, there remained a lone and wounded bioship, which would launch a bundle of myetic spores towards Craftworld Molnár in a final act of animalistic hatred and malice. Once embedded into the Craftworld surface, the spores would unleash untold waves of Tyranid horrors. Although not a huge fighting force in its own right, any amount of Tyranids suddenly appearing where they're not expected is a critical situation. The Eldari aboard the craft world dedicated all of their attention to hunting down the largest creatures, as they posed the greatest threat, and it was believed that they would have the strongest link to the hive mind. This, however, was a fatal mistake, as these creatures were nothing but a distraction from a far more terrifying entity, a single zoanthrope, that would later become known as the Doom of Molnár. Now, a normal zoanthrope is scary enough. They're a specially designed Tyranid organism created from harvested Eldar DNA. They're basically a giant floating brain. The creature is so solely dedicated to the purpose of being a psychic conduit that its limbs are grotesquely underdeveloped, and it's only able to move by levitating itself. Looks can be deceiving, because a zoanthrope is capable of raining down enormous levels of destruction single-handedly, shooting concentrated blasts of warp energy that destroy even the heaviest of armors, while raining down scattered bolts of psychic power to obliterate large hordes of infantry in seconds. Whether by design or an instance of freak mutation, the Doom of Molnár was able to feast upon and absorb not just the physical essence of living creatures in the form of biomass, but in their spiritual essence as well. This entity was able to literally eat souls. The creature made its way to the heart of the craft world, its Infinity Circuit, which, if you're unfamiliar with, is like a massive repository of Eldar souls. When the Eldar are killed in battle, if they are wearing a soul stone,
weren't y'all talking about this as a really bad fucking thing? Didn't you say this is really bad?
The stone is able to absorb their psychic imprint, thus preventing it from going screaming into the warp, where it would inevitably be devoured by Slaanesh. If their allies are able to get the stone back to the ship and plug it into the Infinity Circuit, then the spirit will be able to roam freely through the wraithbone structure of the craft world. The collective spirits of the Eldari dead act like a massive reservoir of psychic energy, but also as a guiding force for the living, as the group consciousness of ancient Eldari can offer wisdom and guidance to their kin. This is one of the main reasons why the Eldar fight so fiercely to defend their craft worlds, because if one of them ends up getting destroyed, it's not just them losing their home, but all of the souls of their ancestors as well. Drawn like a moth to flame, the Doom of Molnár infiltrated the Infinity Circuit and gorged itself on the Eldar souls, feasting like a hungry scavenger that's come across an unprotected nest to plunder. It ate and grew more and more powerful with every ancient soul it devoured. In a mocking twist of fate, those who had been saved from being devoured by Slaanesh were now being consumed by an equally voracious predator. By the time the creature had been discovered, it was far too late, as Mellantai's imminent death had been made manifest. It was said that the doom of Mellantai was nearly invincible. It was able to snap the Eldari Wraith constructs in half with but a thought, and send out waves of crippling destructive
Hey, Mr.
energy.
Day. Thanks for the follow. Love ya. Mwah. Hey, Mr. Day. Thanks for the follow.
Thank you for joining us!
That tore the ship's Wraithbone structure apart. It rained down cataclysmic bolts of stolen psychic power and pulped entire armies of Eldar warriors in seconds. With the exception of a few survivors who managed to escape, everything else was destroyed and consumed by the creature. The Eldar souls ripped from their body while they were still alive. No one knows what happened to this creature, as after the Craftworld had been killed, it seemingly disappeared, and it very well may still be out there. Or possibly, it could have been reconsumed by the hive mind, its ridiculous abilities becoming part of its greater consciousness.
We're watching 5 times that the Tyranids were beyond horrifying, and you know what? I like his videos. Wes is probably one of the ones I've enjoyed the most. He's kept my attention. His videos are around half an hour, and you know there's a good amount of detail. So I like this. I like Wes. I think Wes is a good like lawgiver.
Staring into the eyes of the hive mind,
And he has
the
like
battle known
still
as the
barriers.
devastation of Baal was when.
So that's another thing. I'm gonna go back a second. He has these little title screens, and I like those because I like things neatly in chapters.
Staring into the eyes of the hive mind. The battle known as the devastation of Baal was when Hive Fleet Leviathan had made its way all the way to the homeworld of the Blood Angels, in one of the most devastating invasions the planet had ever seen. This is all detailed in the appropriately named novel Devastation of Baal, so I definitely recommend checking that out if you're a fan of Blood Angels or Tyranids. The novel itself isn't necessarily scary. It's a good old-fashioned Space Marine war story, but there was one scene in particular that I found uniquely unnerving. During the invasion, the Blood Angels are attempting to set a trap for the Tyranids. They have constructed a moat around a fortified position and have filled it with what they refer to as thirst water. Thirst water looks like ordinary water, but it hides a much more terrifying property. For you see, it isn't water at all. In fact, it's alive.
Hey Chaos, I am feeling better, thank you. Sorry I was a little bitch earlier. I've apologised to everyone. I will try not to be a little bitch in future about pain. Wes is new to the community, but he's got a good energy and he makes good vids. He seems pretty cool, to be fair. I'm down with Wes.
Composed of quintillions of individual organisms, the thirstwater lures in its prey with promises of offering refreshment, and as soon as the victim touches it, it begins to consume them, immediately sucking out all of the moisture of the creature, killing it in a pretty horrific manner. The nature of thirstwater is still unknown, whether it was native to Baal Secundus, an ancient weapon of the Dark Age of technology, or a Xeno's creation that had gotten loose. Whatever the case, the Blood Angels had gathered all of it that they could find, and were keeping it secure on Baal. The thirstwater's exact nature made it difficult to study, but it was obvious that it was one of the system's most deadly substances. If the thirstwater had managed to escape, it would seep into the sands of Baal, separating into infinite organisms that would spread across the planet and wreak untold devastation. The idea of using it as a weapon was unthinkable, but this was Baal's darkest hour. The battle that was taking place around the sanctuary was of an unconceivable scale. Trillions of Tyranids rampaged across Baal's surface.
Are you saying I created thirst water to doom because, like, I know I'm thirsting over Slaanesh, but no, actually, yeah, maybe. Oh, I'm joking. In Chaos, that really means a lot to me, thank you. Yeah, it doesn't happen too often, but sometimes it does, and it's very overwhelming when it does, and I can't concentrate on anything else. Yeah, it just wasn't going to be a good experience for either of us, because I wouldn't have been as chatty, I would have been zoning out, and I waited till a point where I could, like, pause the video to be like, okay, this is the moment I can take. Split it up. It's halfway through. And that's, genuinely, that's Slaanesh's title. I am her thirst water. Ooh!
while uncountable spores descended from the upper atmosphere,
I said,
delivering
spoiler,
ever more
I'm gonna
deadly
end up being
payloads
slashed.
of Tyranid monstrosities. Pieces of ships and massive chunks of flesh fell from the sky, remnants of the void battle taking place above them. Hordes of unorganized gaunts rampaged towards the structure, while the Space Marines and the human defenders of Baal fired wave upon wave of shots into them, tearing them apart. They couldn't allow the lesser probing Tyranids to reach the moat.
Chicken, I've gotta say that, I'm sorry. If she who thirsts could thirst for thirst water, how much thirst water could she who thirst for? I'd say at least 7. Thank you, chicken. Also, I'm gonna go by Halesh now. No, I'm joking.
It would ruin the element of surprise, and thus the advantage that the thirst water would provide them. As more and more of the larger Tyranids showed up, the unorganized frenzy of the gaunts slowly got more and more disciplined, as the hive mind's influence grew stronger and stronger. Instead of a random pattern of attacks, the swarm grew larger and more sentient, its tendrils reaching out and probing for weakness. Their numbers formed into solid ranks in their tens of thousands, moving as one towards the perimeter, marching over the destroyed bodies of the other Tyranids. Eventually, the Tyranid numbers reached a critical mass, and the Blood Angels gave the order for everyone to fall back into the sanctuary. The moment was at hand for the thirst water trap to be sprung, a wall of Tyranids so thick that it was impossible to tell where one creature ended and another began, pressed up inches from the moat. But they didn't pursue. Something was wrong. The chaplain pressed forward, standing in defiance of the Tyranid horde, and shouted at them, "Xenos, I am Ordomale, Paternus Sanguinus of the Blood Angels, second only to beloved Astaroth the Grim. Fight me. By the blood, come to my Crozius and accept my blessing." The Tyranids were only about 300 feet away and were separated by the moat. They stood motionless and unblinking. Beneath their feet was a collecting pool of Tyranid blood that was inching closer and closer to the thirst water. Among the sea of infinite gaunts, one stood aside, looking down, watching the blood with suspicious curiosity. It then looked up directly into the face of the chaplain, their eyes meeting. He had stared into the cold black eyes of thousands of these creatures before, but none of them met his gaze quite like this one. Something was deeply wrong with this gaunt. There was something attached to this creature, something truly ancient, as intelligent as it was cruel. The chaplain was staring directly into the eyes of the hive mind itself.
Well, I've said I'm actually going to be looking into the Blood Angels, because so many of you are Blood Angels and Sanguinius. Like, the whole thing is cool, and I like the thirst, and I like that they're balls of rage. So I will be looking into them soon, because there's so many of you, like Chaos, Sean, so many of you have said to me that you're Team Blood Angels. So I'd be down to learn more about them.
An ancient alien god of impossible intelligence and infinite cruelty. A being that could control infinite swarms of Tyranids across infinite battlefields, had chosen to stare out of the eyes of this single gaunt. The impossible weight of its presence pressed on the chaplain's psyche and made him reel. If he had been a lesser man, staring into the eyes of a god like this would have driven him instantly insane. But the chaplain was no lesser man. He was a space marine, and he knew no fear. He raised his bolt pistol and fired a single shot, causing the gaunt's head to detonate. The death of the gaunt was the pebble taken from the dam that causes it to collapse. The hordes of Tyranids fell forward in screeching thousands, pushed on only by their instinct to kill and the weight of the massive horde behind them. They plunged into the water, dying, shrieking in their thousands, their chitinous skeletons surfacing momentarily as a bleached bone reef before sinking back down. The moat nearly filled with Tyranids, but in the end, the Blood Angels managed to survive, as the majority of the Tyranids were killed, while many of the larger beasts ended up falling back. The battle had been won, but the war for Baal was long from over. So this moment, where a space marine stared into the face of a god, this ancient alien creature, looking at him with nothing more than idle curiosity, an insect, a specimen that, compared to itself, was utterly pathetic and insignificant.
White scars. Who are the white scars during the Horus Heresy series? Why would you not put water in like that in the Super Soaker? That'd be so fucking funny.
Now, maybe I'm reading too much into this moment, but to me this represented that true alien Lovecraftian horror that encapsulates the Tyranids so beautifully. That this universe is brutal, alien, and ultimately unforgiving. That there are impossible intelligences out there, obscured by the void of space, entities so utterly alien that they are completely unrecognizable and incomprehensible to mortal minds. Truly ancient beings of impossible power and eldritch horror that see us as nothing more than an oddity to be consumed. that the true nature of the Tyranids and the hive mind is so utterly alien and inconceivable that there is no way to relate or even begin to process them. That the great empire of humanity are thousands upon thousands of years of innovation, history, culture, and conquest, are remarkable feats of technological.
I would like to apologize for my cat falling onto the keyboard. Yes, it is a catastrophe! Right, you did it again. Okay, say goodbye to the cat. She's gotta leave. I love you, but you've stood on the keyboard too many times. You keep pressing things. I hid a lot of it, but I couldn't hide that last two. Say bye. Yeah, Doggo gotta go too. Sorry, Doggo. No, get down. I don't care that you both want to hang out. We can hang out later. What? You go that way? Come here. Eco, please leave your sister out of this. Eco, come here, give me a kiss. Give me a kiss. Give me a kiss. Mwah. Go to bed. Alright. I imagine once I get into the Siege of Terra series, I'll probably start to like the White Scars. I never used to like the Ultramarines, but the Hatred book shows how cool they are. So not the Danny Ward ones, what do you mean? Khan in the Siege is best boy.
Advancement and the countless strides we have made to taming an uncaring universe. Our individual unique stories, as well as the greater epic that is the journey of the human race as a whole, is nothing more than food for the swarm. In the eyes of that gaunt, the Space Marine saw something terrifying. Not anger, wrath, or even murderous intent, as those are human emotions. In the wake of untold devastation across infinite battlefields, this creature, who had killed and consumed untold trillions,
seized dinner.
In its eyes, the chaplain saw only uncaring indifference. The unknown, the utter inability to comprehend something like this, is what makes the Tyranids so terrifying to me. Eaten alive by a hive ship. To close
you
this
told me
video
about
out,
this one.
I want to share with you a passage from the novel The Last Hunt by Robbie McNevin. Robbie managed to capture something that we don't often get to see in the 40k universe: true, unrelenting horror. The Tyranids are absolutely horrifying, but unfortunately, it's often made difficult to truly appreciate that, as these stories are normally told from the perspective of superhuman warriors, clad in power armor. Even when it's told from the perspective of a guardsman, they're normally highly trained men and women, at the very least equipped with military-grade weaponry. This particular passage has none of that, and shows just how horrific the Tyranids truly are. The story depicts what it's like to be eaten alive by a Tyranid hive ship. Now, I don't normally do this in my videos, but I am gonna offer a bit of a warning here. This story is kind of disturbing, and kind of messed me up for like a whole day after I read it.
Hi, Insider! I like your name, it's funny. Khan is my favorite Primarch, just like his father in the period, but is still loyal.
I'm gonna read the passage in its original writing, but I have omitted some of the more graphic depictions. And with that out of the way, let's get into the grimdark. The Vanguard Xenos bioships had passed by. JUF D-19 Rimward was now at the heart of their fleet, and compared to the organic drones that had quested around the main swarm, the true organisms of the Hive fleet were behemoths. Davrick's mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing, as he took in sheets of pockmarked chitin the size of small continents, and toothed orifices the size of cities. The thick clusters of tendrils along its flank and underbelly writhed in the solar winds, while its maw was encompassed by two great, wicked, beak-like bone plates that looked as though they could have sheared an Imperial capital ship in half. And the worst thing about this nightmarish Leviathan was that it was coming straight towards the auger station. "Oh God, Emperor," Ankam stammered over and over. Corday was quietly sobbing, his head in his hands. Serene just stared, the image on the view screen reflected in her wide, dark eyes. Only Crassus turned away from the display. He walked over to the worn leather of his command chair, paused, tugged his dark blue Sensorium Master's uniform straight, and sat down. His expression was unreadable, jaw locked, though in the harsh emergency lumens, he looked more haggard than ever. "Crew members," he said, his words cutting through Ankam and Corday's despair. "In the past decades of service, it shames me to admit that I have not said this enough. Regardless if there was ever a time, a throne knows it's now. It has been an honor to man this station with all of you. And with you, Chief. Davrik said. He was the only one to respond. His own words felt distant, disconnected, as though he was speaking to himself from somewhere far away. His mind was sluggish, unresponsive. His breathing felt labored. A strange, detached part of his mind supposed that he was probably having a panic attack. Crassus had no more orders to give. He simply sat, watching the view screen. Davrik reached out towards his little pic capture of Amelia and Drury, his wife and son, tacked to the side of his monitor. He would see them again. Someday. He was sure of it. A fresh surge of stuttered oaths from Oncom distracted him before he could pull the pict off the side of the display. The Tyranid bioship had filled the view screens. Even as the stunned crew watched, the monstrosity's great hooked chitinous beak split apart. The maw yawned wide, impossibly wide, wide enough, Davrik was sure, to swallow one of Darkin's moons. Its shadow fell across the auger station, blotting out the lights of the stars. The structure around them seemed to shudder, as though its terror matched that of its crew. The view screen now showed nothing but static-washed darkness. The bioship had swallowed them whole. Corday had slumped on the deck, shaking and weeping uncontrollably. Crassus was looking down into his lap, knuckles white, where he gripped the arms of his chair. Oncom had finally stopped gibbering. "Serene," he managed to say, looking over at the auger analyst. "Serene, there's something I need to tell you." She continued to stare at the now blank view screen. A sudden impact threw all of them. Davrik found himself spiraling across the deck, almost on top of Corday. The station shook violently, tremors dislodging rune banks and audio systems. The alarms triggered again across the cramped station. Crassus, who alone had managed to stay in his seat, deactivated them without comment. The view screen had gone offline completely, showing nothing but gray static. They're going to board us," Oncom stammered, as they picked themselves up. Any response was lost in another jarring impact. The station's frame shrieked in protest at the stresses put upon it. With their systems scrambled and broken, it was impossible to tell exactly where they were, or what was happening outside. The station seemed to settle slightly, the sounds of tortured metal reduced to a low creak. They all scanned the ceiling, looking for any sign of a breach. "Do you hear that?" Serene said. It was the first time she'd spoken since seeing the bioship. They all listened, breath held, straining to hear over the groan of adamantium and Corday's muted sobs. Eventually, Davrik caught what Serene had detected, a faint, scratching, scrabbling noise, as though someone, or something, was scraping across the outside of the hull. It mirrored the scratching, tormenting all of them from inside their own skulls. "They're on the hull," Davrik said. But before he could go on, a crash shattered the breathless quiet. The section directly above Crassus's chair in the center of the station's cockpit collapsed. With it came a flood of broiling green liquid that struck Crassus just as he looked up. If the old Sensorium master managed to draw breath to scream, the bioacid flooded his mouth, throat, and lungs before he could make a sound. Davrik caught an impression of his death as he was lost entirely in the torrent, flesh sewing from bones, organics consumed in a heartbeat. The rest of the crew recoiled, but too slowly. Serene, nearest to the center of the cockpit, was struck by the acidic spray. Her hands went up to her exposed face, and her screaming filled the claustrophobic space. "No!" Oncom wailed, lunging across his bench to catch the auger analyst as she collapsed. He managed to drag her hands away from her face, and he recoiled. "Still," she screamed. Oncom doubled over and was sick. Davrik, whose station was furthest away from Crassus's chair, scrambled back on top of his bench as the flood of acid spread across the decking plates. Serene had collapsed into the rising swill, her body coming apart. Oncom tried to push himself against his vox banks, but was sick again and collapsed. The bugs got to him before the acid did. There were insects in the hissing, steaming slime, writhing, sightless maggot things with hard black shells. They swarmed around the discolored vomit-like biomatter. The air full of the susurration of their passing as they swiftly covered the deck, the cogitator stations, workbenches, and walls, riding the rising tide of acid. First hundreds and then thousands of them reached Oncom, swarming over his boots and knees and up his arms, where he was crouched against the Vox systems. He tried to scream, but choked on his own bile. His eyes rolled back in their sockets as the alien swarm began eating him alive.
I would have killed myself before they ever got to me. I would have literally just took myself out. There's no winning this. Everyone line up, shoot each other, shoot yourself, donezo.
Corday killed himself. Face still streaked with tears, he leapt directly from his bench into the stream that had consumed Crassus. He was gone in an instant as the breach in the station's hull was burned wider. As Oncom's eaten-out remains collapsed into the bioorganics sloshing around the cockpit's deck, Davrik stood rooted to the top of his bench. He couldn't think. He couldn't move. He was in the throes of panic. A part of him realized he should end it quickly like Corday, but another part was desperate for another way out. Any way that avoided the nightmare bile that was burning away everything. It was digesting them whole. Even as the terror kept them in place, Grohl's binary chair collapsed, pitching the unresponsive tech adept into the effluvium. His red cloak billowed for a moment before he was lost, coming apart midst the steaming clouds of liquefied organics. For a moment, Davrik was alone. For a single, ludicrous second, everything felt surreal, ridiculous, almost calm. It had to be a nightmare. None of this horror could possibly be real. Then his bench collapsed.
Bye.
He screamed, trying to scramble back onto the plastile's disintegrating remains. No, no, no! The bioacid caught him, sloshing around his boots and his lower fatigues. His panicked wails quickly turned to screams of agony as the material was eaten away, exposing his flesh. Davrik died slowly, on his knees, eaten up inch by the bile and the sightless, burrowing things that swam in it. Eventually, the insects flooded his throat, choking and suffocating him as they ate. The acid took all that remained, as another section of the hull caved in to emit a fresh gout of vicious toxins. The picture of Amelia and Drewy fell from the side of Davrik's primary view screen into the flood, and in an instant, the smiling wife and son were gone, consumed entirely.
Yeah, I would have killed myself. The second we got swallowed, would have been dead. Would have been out of that, you know? Alright, are we ready for the final story? This is a Genestealer cult. And that's why burning the planets to cinders is okay. I didn't mind that. You know what? I don't know what that means, but it sounds like a good idea. I'm surprised they didn't do that 2-shock system. Hopefully that means it would have blew it up. And then they would have blew up the guys inside. But no, I would have literally just like... I would have fucking ended it. I'm not gonna get eaten alive. Fuck that. You know what I mean? Like... No.
This is my last will and testament. My name is Simon Baring, Class 2 Goods Fabrication Specialist. They know why I'm here.
Omabrax, I'm doing this for you! It wasn't on the list, but I added it last minute, remember?
I hear them clicking and screaming to each other. They
Yeah.
won't get in. They took this world in blood and darkness.
I agree, Bungalow. They should have done that.
No surprise. I only realized what was happening when it was far too late.
Hyena, that's bullying. I do not advocate bullying children.
I saw horrible things.
I don't advocate children. At all. Just don't have kids. Then you don't have to bully them.
I was brought on world by special request of the cult Mechanicus leader named Mago Smythe. He had need for my knowledge and skills. I don't think Mago Smythe was involved in what happened here, but I can't be sure. My family and I had lived on Medusa 2C. We lived well and happily on a wage I made from my work. I was born there. I always imagined I would die there, beneath that violet star. But fate had another idea for me. I moved here to Unisgard with my wife, Nicolia, and our daughter, Katrin, 3 standard years ago. Things started 2 months ago. We were accoladed on the top floor of Hab Zone T66. I've never seen anything like it. Real organic furnitures, free food, clean water.
Nice.
That was what made us stay. And you're wondering why I'm giving so much detail. It's to prove to you that I am who I claim to be. Katie's Skull wasn't some Ministorum-built spire with 600 children inside being whipped with tasers. Our classes were all small. The teachers knowledgeable, fair, and above all warm. A few months ago, Katie asked if she can invite her friend over, a boy named Malik. I said yes. I wish we had not done so and will forever rue that day. The two returned home after their lessons. I thought nothing of it. Why would I? They were just two children being children. Until I realized that Malik never laughed. He never squealed or shouted. He never made any noise you would expect from a child. But worst of all were his eyes. Children have a spark in their eyes that doesn't go out until they've been grounded down. He had the cold eyes of an animal. I spent the next 5 days essing quietly and carefully around my manufactorum, seeing if anyone else had noticed it. They did.
I think he'd stated that, like, he was in the upper echelon. I'm assuming he got a promotion or something that put him into an area of life that he wasn't accustomed to.
Iron Brock. He told me how he had been here for 6 years and he had noticed it becoming more common. My work with fusion and fission kept me busy 14 hours a day. What time did I have to spend at home? So I never got to see the flocks of blank-eyed children wandering the city. I never saw the pregnant women who only bore their children for 4 months. But I did hear it. The screech. I was 4 layers into a thermonuclear reactor, clad in layers of shielded armor, when the sound exploded in my head.
That's
It
cool.
took me
Chaos.
25 minutes to get out of the core and 25 more to strip the high-hazard suit off and scramble out. The factory was a butcher's yarn.
It is very cool.
Dead bodies everywhere. Either flayed, consumed, or both. The avenues were choked with the bodies of men and women who just wanted to work.
Hey, Frothy Jazz, welcome in. Yes, it is Warrior Tier. It's my first time experiencing anything. Omabrax asked me to watch it.
Who just wanted to give their families a better life. I saw Hiren Brock laying in a circle of 20 corpses. A bent rebar still gripped his hand. I remember I tried to save him. May he rest in the light of the Emperor. After an hour, I made it outside to see the hab towers that reached the skies being pulled down. I stood, blinking in stunned horror as 50-story buildings crumbled and collapsed into plumes of dust. They were pulled down by bellowing mountains of claws. Chitin claws, teeth, eyes, so many eyes. Most of the people on world were caught unprepared. I saw the planetary defense force overwhelmed and ripped apart like they were nothing. But I honor them. Those brave soldiers tried.
The Ogrin story is a personal favourite. This one's close second. Ooh, maybe I should check that out sometime.
I saw a mechanized division of the Imperial Guard who had stopped on world for supplies ripped apart. Their armored vehicles poured rounds into the waves of ravening animals. To no avail. I watched as 6 identical beasties, twice the height of a man, pull a tank apart. He must have been a commander, ordered his damn crew to fire one last time. I've never seen a tank fire like a cannon before. Everyone in any position of power disappeared instantly or was dragged screaming into the streets. I watched from the back of a hauler cab as General Prague of the PDF was pulled from his offices. The beast hadn't thought to check for his weapon. From the Lord Magistratum to the personal aid of the on-world Mechanicus delegation, everyone except the Chief Ministorum was devoured. He wasn't consumed because he was one of them. I saw through a cloud of smoke. Standing before a statue, a stone, a monument maybe. He was holding his arms. All 3 of them to the skies. And I heard the million beings around him chanting. I'll never forget that monument, carved with images from Hell's own heart. And thrown the way the crowd swayed and rotated, worshipping the three figures standing around it.
It's important to note that Genestealer cults aren't always started as a religion or brainwashed drones. A lot of them are completely willing people who suffer under tyrants, the poor and the desperate. Nice.
That was when the brag exploded. He must have hidden 15 pounds of high-X charges in his jacket. An honorable death. I scrambled my way home. The 35-minute journey took 4 hours. I saw the creatures as tall as tanks rip people from beneath automotives and carry them screaming into the dark. I saw tentacle-faced, almost invisible things stalk around rooftops before plunging into stores and leaving a few moments later, caked in gore. Most of all were the children. They swarmed in packs of 40, pulling down the last tenacious pockets of resistance. They knew their enemies couldn't bring themselves to shoot children.
I could shoot kids. Fucking give me a gun, I'll take out 40 of them in a go.
They used that knowledge. Natalia, Katia, and I managed to hide in the back of our high block. My work allowed me a mid-level apartment. It was well appointed, within an arm's reach of doors that were easy to hack open.
Hey Benjamin, welcome in. K. Holmes cares not where the blood flows. Listen. Corn, sorry. I'm just saying. I'm sorry, Benjamin. I am a follower of chaos. But I could shoot kids. I'd kill those kids in a second. Wouldn't even question it. I'd be like, oh, Genestealers? Okay. Like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'd just keep shooting until they were gone. Because I'm not about to die to no kids.
Thankfully, due to my training and natural aptitude, I managed to reroute enough power to send some messages. In all honesty, I sent 2.
Thank you, Sean.
One to any Imperial forces listening, and the other to Medusa 2C.
Well, they wouldn't be able to hear anything.
My father, requesting he tell the authorities there what I had seen. My wife and I spent 4 weeks stealing food from the empty hab units around us. Enough to keep us going. We took pics of everything we could, from the footprints with their 4 toes heavy and clawed, to pics of that huge monument that stood in the city center. By now it was covered in bones of the citizens of this world.
Question. Yeah, don't the Tyranids cut off the warp so they wouldn't be able to get any message out of there anyway? Yes, he did, Dadoom. He's into the alien feet pics.
From hab unit to hab unit, capturing images from my neighbors' window panels. Thankfully, our neighbors stockpiled everything they could. They never returned. I prayed for them every night. I hope they know they allowed my daughter to survive. I hope they found the peace I found when I saw her dark brown eyes. I hope they never know the pain I felt when I had to force myself to let go of her hand. Knowing it was the final time I would see those eyes. I managed to get my family off-world through negotiations with a member of the Inquisition. Her name was... Access verified. She offered me a trade. The price for my family's safety was this. I stay in the world and do what I'm about to do. I must do it, because no one else can. What a stupid thing. But I do it with pride, with a smile on my face.
But Nids don't like fighting chaos because no biomass. Fair. But Genestealer cults don't... Wait, I just lost that message. Can you resend that last message? Because I lost it.
I do it so my daughter Catherine will see another solar eclipse, another dawn. And do it so she can live and run free across worlds beyond my imagining. I do it so Natalia may again be adored as I adore her. Her light is too pure to be kept by a dead man.
Dead.
But in the small moments I have left of life, I will never forget them leaving me for the last time. The Inquisitor's ship made planetfall in the dead of night. Its sleek black hull was a shadow.
It's literally called Genestealer Cult, a story.
I couldn't explain to them that I had to stay here. I told her I would see her soon as the black armored soldiers lifted her aboard. I still see her face as the ramp shut. Her face haunted and fearful. Broken by having to leave here. Those words on her lips, mouthing them to me as she said goodbye.
Alert! Alert! Plasma filtration failure is 196% above standardized levels.
This is my last will and testament because I was told I had to blow the main plasma generator.
Genestealer cults don't generate as strong as a shadow in the warp, otherwise the authorities would immediately know something was up. That's fair. And it is a great short story.
There's something hidden here that those animals outside aren't allowed to get. Something worth destroying, worth denying to the enemy. It's my job to make sure that...
Alert! Gyro stabilization failure imminent. Seek off-world transportation immediately.
I dreamed I would die in Medusa. An old man surrounded by family. But I'll die here. Bathed in the blue light of plasmic vision. With Katia and Nick in my mind.
Plasma breach imminent. Transferring logs to nearest Mechanicus vessel.
Saw twin Aquila in my hand. A fair trade. Your father dies, so a young girl lives. Forgive me, Natalia. Forgive me.
I think she'd forgive him. Okay, yo, we did it. We learned everything, and we listened to the stories. It's only once the hive sheet arrives that the shadow makes communication difficult, if not impossible. Okay. Flash a light and then you're out. It's true. We did it! I'm so sorry that this had to be split into 2 videos, as I've already said. But thank you so much for everyone who came back for the second part of the stream. I do appreciate you. Tomorrow we'll be doing Astartes, the mini movie, I believe. And then we'll be going into, let me get up my document because I've got everything written down. Then we'll be going to Dawn of War 3 intro and then memes. So we did it! Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Shock. But I hope you guys enjoyed learning about the Tyranids with me. We will be learning about more things. And tomorrow we'll be back with Astartes. Hey, don't even worry about it. Don't even worry about it. Taking my first step, I have. It was a joy meeting you two, the Doom. And Chicken, I hope you take care as well. Guys, if you did like this live stream, please do leave a like, as I mentioned. I've not seen Astartes yet. I'm seeing it tomorrow. We're watching it tomorrow, Chaos. So, 6 p.m. UCT. If you guys did like this, remember I'm getting a lot of downvotes on these lives, but I'm enjoying hanging out with you guys. So please do leave a like if you enjoy them, because it tells me that you guys want me to keep doing them. Good night, Bungalow. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate you all, and I hope you have the best day. I am proud of you for getting through today. I'm even more proud of you for getting through tomorrow. Arrivederci, arrivederci, goodashudus, alawago. Peace. I will see you all in the next one. See you tomorrow. Hyena. Comments. Put your recommendations in the comments. I take all of them. I take all of them. I love you all. Bye.